with us, she doesn't have to worry about a performance review, so maybe it was sincere. But we certainly miss Jean. She was a wonderful vice president for our marketing and communications for a number of years, and a wonderful trusted colleague. Unfortunately, I left the back door unlocked one day, and she escaped. So anyway, but it's an honor to be with you here today. I'm a fellow Rotarian for over 20 years, so I know the great work that this club does and that Rotary does internationally. So first of all, thank you for all of that effort. My wife and I are thrilled to be here in the Lowcountry. Sticking to kind of my past performance, it's always about the timing. So the idea of picking up and moving to a new community in the middle of a pandemic when everything was locked down and trying to find a house in the middle of a very hot real estate market was less than ideal, but we were really glad to be here and to become members of the Lowcountry and to get to know this community so much better. I was thrilled to have this opportunity to join the Community Foundation of the Lowcountry. As Jean says, I've had the privilege of working in this field of community foundations now for about 34 years. And I still am convinced it is one of the most unique forms of philanthropy, very innovative in the impact that it has not only in local communities but collectively. And in fact, the background on the Community Foundation goes back 108 years ago when the Cleveland Foundation was created. There was a banker who had worked with the Carnegies and the Mellons and the Rockefellers and realized that most people didn't have that sort of means in order to contribute to philanthropy, and wondered, might there be a model to allow individuals of any means to collectively give to improve their local communities. And so the Cleveland Foundation was established in 1914 and was the grandfather, if you will, of the Community Foundation movement, which today now in the United States, there are over 830 community foundations in this country. And as of the end of 2021, collectively has $144 billion in charitable assets. And just to show you the growth, and it's not necessarily in the number of foundations, but just in the growth, the combined assets of community foundations in the United States grew by 58% over the last 5 years. Now obviously the strong financial markets have helped, but increasingly people are seeing the value of working with a community foundation to improve their local communities in ways that are important to them. And we're happy to be a part of that here in the Lowcountry. As Jean said, the Community Foundation of the Lowcountry was actually seeded here in 1994. So we're a relatively young organization in the history of community foundations. And it came about in a unique way in that when the Hilton Head Hospital was sold, there was money left that was a public charity, and so the question was, what do we do with this money that is now available? And the decision was made by the community leaders at that time and the hospital board to seed what was initially called the Hilton Head Island Foundation. And so the foundation was seeded with the proceeds from the hospital and a vision to say, what might we do to improve the community that the hospital had served. So think of primarily southern Beaufort County as the original territory of the foundation. So Bluffton, Hilton Head Island were the primary beneficiaries of that. But about 10 years into the foundation's beginnings, there was a realization that, you know what, we're really part of a larger region. And so the decision was made in 2004 to change the name to the Community Foundation of the Lowcountry and to expand our service territory to include all of Beaufort County as well as Jasper, Hampton, and Colleton counties. And so we've been about that since 2004. Since that time, the foundation has grown. As Jean says, we're just right at the $100 million asset mark for the first time in the foundation's history. Over those roughly 27 years, the foundation's awarded almost $88 million in grants throughout the Lowcountry and another almost $8.7 million in scholarships. So people often wonder, so where does the money come from? How are you funded? How does it operate? And that's the great thing going back to the Cleveland Foundation model, is that the Community Foundation is a vehicle for people of any means to be able to participate in philanthropy and to things that are important to them. So as my longtime mentor who first introduced me to the Community Foundation field said, we have the pleasure of working with people when they're at their very best. So whether it's someone who wants to make life better for other people, like talking about creating a fund or participating in some way, or it's someone who's serving on a nonprofit board that is doing important work in the community, we have the privilege of working with people when they're trying to make life better for others, and that's a real pleasure. The great thing about this work is that seldom do we ever have all the great ideas. In fact, usually people come to us, and I want to just share with you just a couple quick stories. One is, you may be aware, I hope you've heard of by now, of the South Carolina Nurse Retention Scholarship Program. This was created by two gentlemen in the area who realized that, like many communities, we are struggling to retain healthcare workers, and specifically nurses in the area, whether that's in hospitals or private offices or in public facilities. And so their idea was, what if we could create a fund that once someone is already in nursing and is employed locally, what if there was a stipend as a way to entice them to stay where they are? And so they created, just in the last year, the South Carolina Nurse Retention Program, a scholarship program. And think of it as a kind of reverse scholarship. So these are folks who've already graduated, have been licensed, and they've been working at least 6 months in their current job in Beaufort County. And the first group of 4 recipients was awarded earlier this year, and they receive $6,000 stipend each for up to 4 years, so a total of $24,000 if they stay employed. They have to verify their employment every 6 months so that we know they're still there. But it was just an innovative idea, and they've gone out raising money to try to do that. We would love to see something similar happen for teachers, because that's also a critical public service need. So again, individuals came to us saying, could you all be the back office for this? We'll do the fundraising, we'll put this together, and we'll be happy to administer it. The foundation last year was also the beneficiary of a wonderful bequest from a woman, Dr. Julian Foster. Dr. Foster was among the first African-American dentists licensed in the United States, had a profound and it's a very successful career in dental circles. She was on the faculty of Northwestern University. She and her husband in retirement moved to the Lowcountry, and she got involved with a program of the foundation called Women in Philanthropy. Again, a pooling of women who contribute dollars. They come together and make decisions about programs to support in the area. She got really interested in that, and sadly when she passed away in 2020, but she has left a wonderful bequest that will benefit women in philanthropy and will allow each year an additional $20,000 to be awarded in perpetuity to support programming that the Women in Philanthropy wants to support. She came to us because she got introduced to needs in the Lowcountry through Women in Philanthropy, and she's left a wonderful legacy. More recently, the foundation also, while we have a lot of long-term projects, we also try to be nimble and flexible when there are needs and circumstances change. Obviously, as a result of the pandemic, there have been a lot of needs that 3 years ago none of us would have anticipated, but the foundation was able to step in and help create a vehicle for people to partner. One of the things the foundation did was back in 2020, they created the COVID-19 Response Fund, and we made, the foundation put the first $200,000 in from our competitive grant making dollars, and challenge the community that if you're interested in supporting your fellow residents that are being impacted by the pandemic, you have that opportunity to contribute to that fund. And the community's response was fantastic as a result of the generosity of the community in lots of different ways. We were able to grant over $700,000 to nonprofit organizations throughout the Lowcountry. And at your tables, at the conclusion of that, we were always interested in what did we learn, what might we do differently or better in the future. We actually surveyed the 43 grant recipients from the 4 counties and asked them kind of what have you learned from the pandemic, what has changed in the way you carry out your needs, what will the ongoing impact be for your organization, and also what are some of the silver linings, what did you learn that you'll keep doing as a result of that. We also surveyed the donors and asked them, why did you give, what are your ongoing concerns, and it's all compiled in this report as well as a listing of all the nonprofits, so if you're interested in any of that learning, there are copies on the table. More recently, also as a result of the pandemic, you're aware that the federal government has been pumping a lot of money through governmental entities to try to help offset the losses of the pandemic. And we have been privileged to now partner with the town of Bluffton. Chris has been a wonderful partner with us, and with the town of Hilton Head to distribute some of their federal ARPA funds. We've been asked to administer it. We've just set up the relationship with the town of Bluffton, and in fact, the deadline for proposals is this coming Monday. And Chris and the town council have worked with the foundation, and we have formed a 7-person committee made up of Bluffton residents that will be vetting all the proposals that we receive based on the criteria and making funding decisions. And over the course of the next year or so, the foundation will be able to award about a little over $500,000 to Bluffton-based nonprofits that are still wrestling with the impact of the pandemic and helping people who are still trying to come out of that situation. So we love the opportunities for public-private partnerships, and we're in some discussions with the town about some other things that we might do together, so we always appreciate that. If you think, though, that, if you still think that philanthropy is just for those who can write the really big checks, I want to share a story that I witnessed in December of this last year. The foundation, at the end of each year, sends out just a general appeal looking for individual contributions in honor of someone or in memory of someone. And every dollar that comes in goes into a permanent endowment. The income generated off that is used by our grant-making committee to make grants throughout the 4-county region. And we received a number of very generous gifts from people, but we also had an individual who came in who brought us $500 of her tip money. She is a waitress on the island, and she was aware of the fact that there was this effort and she wanted to do something. And she said, you know, I've been fortunate to make it through the pandemic, and here's $500 from my tips from this last week, and I want to contribute. And so we welcome gifts of any size from everywhere, and everyone can play a role in philanthropy. The foundation has the privilege of partnering with a number of residential communities. I think there are 9 communities in Bluffton or in Hilton Head that have pulled their resources together and have created a fund. The foundation administers that, and then we work with the residents of those communities through a funding process that they make grants and awards. And one of the things that we've started last fall is we're now bringing those 9 communities together to share what are you learning, what are your priorities, what might you all do together that could have an even greater impact than doing it alone. And the groups have been very responsive to that and are looking at ways that they might commingle their efforts to try to have an even greater impact on opportunities. Foundation, obviously, in addition to working with donors and accomplishing what they want to do, we also are privileged to have some funding that allows us to respond to nonprofits. So we run grant cycles throughout the year where nonprofits throughout the 4 counties can come to us with specific requests on for program or capital needs that they have. We have a grants committee made up of representatives of our board and community residents that participate in that process. They vet the proposals. If they're awarded, we do a contract with the grantee, and we do a follow-up at the end to say, what did we learn? What did you learn? What went right? What went wrong? And it helps better inform us in terms of decisions going forward. The foundation also has been privileged to be in the scholarship administration business. The foundation, as I mentioned earlier, has awarded about $8.8 million since the scholarship program was started. For this current academic year, which will be winding down next month, the foundation was able to award just shy of $800,000 in scholarships to 151 different students, and I believe they went to 71 different schools. Some are local, some go all across the country, but we're privileged to be able to work and help students continue their education. One of the struggles we've had, to be honest with you, in part because of our origin, is that a lot of our scholarship funds have been restricted to southern Beaufort County, and that's great because there's tremendous needs here, but there are a lot of students in our other outlying counties that we don't have as many resources for. We were fortunate to pick up 2 new donors who established funds in the last 6 months who wanted to tackle that. And so one couple seeded an endowed scholarship fund that will allow us to work with students in Jasper, Hampton, Colleton, and Beaufort County. And our staff has been out into the schools in Hampton and Jasper so far to work with students to get them online and working to fill out the applications. We're in the very beginning of our scholarship season, and we'll have committees coming through and making funding decisions. Our hope is that I would like to say within the next 3 or 4 years that we're able to routinely grant over $1 million a year in scholarships, because we know education is so critical to lives, and it's critical to our economy to continue to have a trained workforce, so that's something that we want to do. Moving forward, the foundation realizes that our ability to have an impact is only as strong as the nonprofits that are on the front lines doing the work. And so we have a commitment to trying to make sure that they have what they need to be strong and to grow and to do everything as efficiently and effectively as they can. We do that by making grants to them to help with strategic plans or perhaps expansion of staff where needed. We also do that by offering a leadership training. We have a consultant who is a retired organizational behavior expert who worked in the corporate world and has done some work in nonprofits. Each year we work with 6 or 7 nonprofit executive directors, and they meet, in fact they're meeting today in our offices. They meet monthly for over 9 months, and they learn professional development, but they also learn group-wise about how to work with the board, how to become a stronger leader, and we feel like that's another way for the foundation to give back. We have just completed a study through the College of Charleston and the Joseph Riley Center for Livable Communities, looking at a number of issues that and data from our 4 county service territory to better inform our board and the broader community about needs in these areas. It touched on education, health, poverty, transportation issues, environmental issues, and so in the next probably 6 weeks you'll start seeing things roll out about kind of our findings on that study. But it helps better inform us as to what role the foundation may play, even beyond just being a grant maker, things that the foundation can do. I want to close with a story that I think best illustrates the potential impact of community foundations. And this is a personal story that probably has had as much impact on my life and career as any other story. And I've had the privilege over 34 years of working with literally thousands of people who are doing good work. And in my time in Winston-Salem, I worked with a number of extremely generous and extremely wealthy individuals, all of whom I enjoyed working with. But this particular story is what kind of, I think, motivates me on a daily basis. This goes back to 1990, and I was just a couple years into my work at the Winston-Salem Foundation. And one day I got a phone call that came through, and a gentleman asked if the foundation was in the scholarship business, and I said, yes, sir, we've been in the scholarship business for quite a while. And he asked some questions about things about potential interest and some things that he would like to consider doing. Excuse me. I gave him the answer, and we talked for a few minutes, and I said, well, I'd be happy to send you some information or happy to meet with you. And he said, well, I'm not quite ready to meet. I said, well, can I send you some materials? And he said, no, he said, I'm homeless. And I said, excuse me? And he said, I'm homeless, I'm living in one of the shelters. And I said, oh, okay, well, I didn't know what to make of it. And I didn't know, quite honestly, if I'd ever hear from him again. He said, but I'll be back in touch. So, sure enough, about 4 weeks later, the phone rings, and it's the same gentleman on the phone. And I can tell he's at a payphone. Now, I know none of you are old enough to remember payphones, but they used to be that you put a quarter in and you were out on the street. But I could tell because I could hear the traffic going by. And he said, I don't know if you remember me. And I said, I certainly do remember you. I remember our conversation. He said, well, I'm ready to talk about establishing a scholarship fund in memory of my mom. And I said, well, I'd be happy to. When would you like to come in? He said, how about 10 minutes? I said, okay. Yeah. So sure enough, about 10 minutes later, George shows up in our lobby, and he's literally carrying all his worldly belongings on his back. He's got a backpack. You can tell he's had a tough go of it. We later confirmed that, in fact, he was staying at one of the homeless shelters in Winston-Salem. And he came in and sat down, and we talked, and he said, I want to establish a scholarship fund in memory of my mother. And I just said, you know, I feel really uncomfortable about this. I think, couldn't you use this money? And he said, well, no, this is for my mother's estate. She recently died. She was a teacher here in the school system, and I want to do something in her memory. And I just said, I really am not comfortable with this. And he said, you got to do this, because if I keep the money, it's going to be spent on things that aren't good, and it'll be harmful to myself. This is what I want to do. So we talked a little while, and after talking through kind of the terms and criteria, he slid a check across the table for $45,000. And we just said, this is a lot of money, and have you talked to an advisor? No, I know what I want to do. This is in memory of my mom, and I'm getting ready to hitchhike out to Colorado to see if I can find some construction work. So we said, well, let us pull up these documents. And nope, I trust you. I don't want any documents. I said, well, we got to document this. And nope, I trust you. And I said, well, out of curiosity, how did you find your way to us? He said, well, it's a funny story. He said, he said, I got through high school. I was not a particularly strong student. He ended up being drafted and served in Vietnam. He was with the 101st Airborne. He came back with a lot of challenges, as many veterans did, and was not welcomed the way that he should have been welcomed back. He said, but I was thinking about college, and a friend said, well, go to the Winston-Salem Foundation. They've got a scholarship program. And he said, I came and I applied, and you know what? You turned me down. And he said, and now I know I can trust you, because I would not have been a good candidate. So anyway, to wrap up the story, we ended up with this long-term relationship with George. The good news is he eventually got help through a VA facility and lived out his life in Arizona. He came back and forth to Winston-Salem from time to time to check on his mother's grave and to check in with the foundation staff. Bless his heart, he would call us and leave a message saying, you can call me back and collect. And I was like, no, George, don't worry. I think the foundation can handle the long distance phone call. But it's just a true story. And I got a call, this was several years after the fund was established, I got a call one day from the New Mexico Highway Patrol. And he said, this is Officer so-and-so, do you know George? And I said, yeah. He said, I patrol the interstate, and George is out hiking on the interstate, and I stopped see if I could help him, try to get him to his next point. And he said no, he didn't need any help, and I was asking him about it, and he pulled out your business card and he told me this story about this scholarship fund. He said he's got this scholarship fund in memory of his mom. Is this true? So I went on and told him the story and said yes. And he said, this is unbelievable. So the highway patrolman actually sent money to the foundation because George wouldn't accept any money and put it in his mother's fund. And he was just so touched by the story. So the great news is, although George is no longer with us, his mother's scholarship fund has helped a couple dozen students continue their education. And that's really, at the end of the day, what this is about, is helping people wherever they are accomplish what's important to them, whether it's in memory or honor of someone else or addressing a community need. So we here at the Community Foundation are here as a resource to partner with people who have charitable interests, whether it's a governmental entity or individual donors or civic clubs. And the beauty of this is that the work with the foundation will continue long after I'm gone and all of us are gone. So I've also put out just two other materials. One is one of Gene's last pieces of work is our annual report that came out late last fall. It has all of our grants listed and our funds. And then a new report we just put out, because we have a lot of donors that struggle with thinking through what do you want your charitable legacy to be. And so it's a real simple project thing to work through that will help you think through what are the things that are most important to you, what are the things you want to impact. So if it's helpful, I would encourage you to take it with you. With that, I know I'm up against my time, but I'm also happy to stay around after to answer any individual questions. And I thank you again for what you're doing and for the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Thank you, Scott. Like you said,